amid the opulent blaze of 1,000 flickering candles in the grand ballroom, where crystal chandeliers cast ethereal shadows upon swirling silks and whispered intrigues, Lady Unthinkable stood frozen, her pulse thundering as the lecherous Baron Vesper's grip tightened on her arm, his breath a venomous murmur promising ruin in the shadowed corridors beyond. In that heart-stopping instant, a commanding stranger emerged from the throng, tall, raven-haired, with eyes like storm-tossed seas, declaring her his betrothed with a voice that brooked no dissent, his touch a lifeline pulling her from the abyss of disgrace. Yet as the night unfolded, his refusal to dissolve the ruse unveiled layers of peril and yearning, binding their fates in a dance of deception that threatened to consume them both. If this moment of daring rescue and hidden vulnerability gripped you, hit subscribe now, because the revelations ahead will shatter illusions and forge unbreakable bonds in ways you never anticipated. The grand ballroom of Eldridge Hall shimmered under the weight of opulence, where the air hung heavy with the scent of beeswax candles and exotic perfumes, and the strains of a waltz wove through the murmurs of London's elite like silken threads binding secrets. Lady Unthinkable, her auburn curls framing a face etched with quiet defiance, felt the world tilt as Baron Vesper's fingers dug into her elbow, his leering smile promising a fate worse than scandal in the dim alcove beyond the French doors. She had come as a mere companion to the Dowager Marchioness Ilaria, invisible amid the swirl of gowns and jewels, but now invisibility was her curse. No one noticed her plight, no one intervened as he tugged her toward shadows that whispered of irreparable ruin. In that suspended breath of terror, a figure materialized from the crowd, tall, with raven hair swept back from a chiseled brow, and eyes like turbulent oceans that pierced the haze. "Unhand my fiancé at once," Viscount Draven Voss commanded, his voice a velvet blade slicing through the din, his hand extending to claim hers with an authority that brooked no refusal. Eloan's heart hammered as she placed her palm in his, the warmth of his grip a stark contrast to the Baron's chill. Who was this stranger, and why would he weave such a bold lie to save her? As the Baron's face twisted in shock and retreat, Draven drew her aside, his posture a wall against prying eyes. "Play along for the night," he murmured, his breath stirring the tendrils at her temple. "Or he'll ensure your downfall spreads like wildfire through these halls." Eloan nodded, her mind reeling, gratitude warred with suspicion. For in his stormy gaze she glimpsed not just rescue, but a flicker of something deeper, a shared recognition of vulnerability in this gilded cage. The ballroom's rhythm resumed, but Eloan's world had fractured. She stole glances at Draven as he navigated the throng, introducing her with seamless poise as his intended, his arm a steady anchor. Yet beneath the facade, questions burned. What drove this Viscount to risk his reputation for a stranger? And how long could she maintain the pretense before it unraveled her carefully guarded heart? What would you do in this moment of sudden vulnerability, thrust into a stranger's protective lie? Comment below and share your thoughts. Eloan retreated with Draven to a secluded alcove draped in velvet curtains, the muffled laughter of dancers filtering through like distant echoes. Her borrowed slippers pinched her feet, a reminder of her borrowed life. 5 years as a companion had taught her to fade into backgrounds, to swallow opinions like bitter tonics, to exist as a shadow in great houses where she mended hems and fetched cordials without complaint. "Why did you do that?" she whispered, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Draven regarded her with those oceanic eyes, his expression a mask of controlled austerity. "Vesper is a viper," he replied, his tone clipped yet laced with an undercurrent of fury. "I've seen him destroy reputations before. No woman deserves such a fate. Not on my watch." As they lingered, fragments of Draven's world emerged. He spoke briefly of his sisters, 2 young women under his guardianship since their parents' tragic demise, his voice softening imperceptibly at their mention. "Family demands sacrifices," he said, folding his arms across his broad chest, the crisp lines of his evening coat speaking of wealth hard won. Eloan sensed the weight he carried. a crumbling estate rebuilt through sheer will, a title that bound him to society's expectations, and a heart fortified against betrayal after a past engagement shattered by fortune's reversal. Yet in his gaze, she caught glimpses of hidden depths, a dry wit that surfaced in his observation of the ball's absurdities, a quiet protectiveness that extended beyond his kin. For Eloan, this encounter stirred long-buried desires. Orphaned by her father's gambling debts, she had forsaken dreams of love for the security of service, her spirit caged by invisibility. "I am Eloan Kalari," she offered, lifting her chin with the defiance that had sustained her through lonely nights. "A companion, not a debutante. This ruse could cost me everything." Draven's almost smile tugged at his lips. "Then let us make it worth the risk. Call me Draven, for tonight at least." As the evening pressed on, Draven wove her into conversations with lords and ladies, his hand at her back a subtle claim. Eloan played her part, her wit emerging in subtle retorts that drew his approving glances. But beneath the charade, fears gnawed. Her employer, the formidable Dowager Marchioness Ilaria, would demand explanations, and society's gaze could turn cruel. Draven, too, harbored secrets. Why protect a stranger when his own life demanded caution? Their alliance felt fragile, a bridge over an abyss of unknowns. By midnight, as they paused near a floral archway heavy with lilies and roses, Eloan felt the first stirrings of something perilous. Not just gratitude, but a curiosity about the man behind the mask. "This pretense ends at dawn," she said, though her heart whispered otherwise. The alcove's seclusion shattered as the Dowager Marchioness Ilaria swept toward them, her fan snapping like a judge's gavel, her eyes narrowing at the sight of Eloan on Draven's arm. "What is this I hear of an engagement?" she demanded, her voice a whip-crack amid the ballroom's hum. Eloan froze, her stomach knotting. Years of loyal service could evaporate in an instant if the Dowager deemed her scandalous. Draven stepped forward smoothly, his composure unyielding. "A recent understanding, my lady," he lied with polished ease, "kept private until tonight." Ilaria's gaze raked over Eloan like appraising flawed porcelain. "Preposterous. You've been in my employ 3 months, girl, and mentioned no such attachment." The confrontation escalated as whispers rippled through nearby guests, turning heads toward the unfolding drama. Eloan, drawing on reserves of courage, met her employer's stare. "It was not my place to share, my lady," but Ilaria waved a dismissive hand. "Engaged to a viscount? Improper for a companion. You'll leave my service at once. Your things sent to—" She trailed off expectantly. Draven interjected. "My aunt, Lady the Lyra Voss, will chaperone her at our Mayfair residence." Eloan's world spun. In one stroke, she was homeless, jobless, thrust into the unknown. As Ilaria departed in a rustle of silks, Draven turned to Eloan, his expression grave. "This has spiraled," he admitted. "Vesper's tale would ruin you otherwise. Maintain the fiction a while longer through the season if need be. I'll provide for you, ensure your security." Shock coursed through her. 3 months as his pretend fiancé? The offer was practical, born of his sense of duty to protect the vulnerable, echoing his guardianship of his sisters. Yet it ignited a spark, romantic whispers amid the pretense, his steady presence stirring long-dormant hopes. Eloan hesitated, her defiance warring with necessity. "And at the end?" she asked. "Independence. A settlement to choose your path." His eyes held hers, a silent plea. Overwhelmed, she agreed, sealing their pact with a clasped hand that sent unexpected warmth through her veins. But as they re-entered the fray, Lady the Lyra approached, her silver hair gleaming, eyes alight with curiosity. "Nephew, rumors fly of your betrothal. Introduce me to this enchanting surprise." The night ended with Eloan in Lady Thalira's carriage, the Viscount's farewell glance lingering. What had begun as rescue now bound her to a man whose secrets promised both salvation and heartbreak. Weeks slipped by until time itself seemed to unravel, blurring into a glittering tapestry of social obligations and careful performances. Eloan found herself firmly ensconced within Lady Thalira's elegant townhouse, a world of polished mirrors, hushed servants, and unspoken expectations. Her days were consumed by endless fittings for gowns Draven insisted upon, silks and satins chosen with strategic precision rather than vanity. "Appearances matter in this game," he explained once, watching a seamstress pin lace at her shoulder. His tone was measured, almost detached, yet there was something gentler beneath it, a reluctant tenderness that made her chest ache. Their outings grew frequent, predictably unpredictable in how much she came to anticipate them. Afternoon drives through Hyde Park became a ritual, the rhythmic clip of hooves accompanying his dry, incisive observations about society's follies. Eloan found herself laughing more freely than she had in years, surprised by how easily he coaxed amusement from her. As though humor were his quiet rebellion against the world he navigated so deftly. Evenings at the opera unfolded in hushed splendor. While the orchestra swelled and singers lamented love and loss, Draven leaned close, murmuring commentary sharp enough to spark whispered debates that lingered long after the final curtain fell. Those conversations, half intellectual sparring, half shared delight, followed them into carriage rides home, where silence grew companionable rather than strained. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Eloan discovered layers to him. The formidable Duke softened in the presence of his sisters, Leora and Mirabelle, whom he introduced during a series of family dinners. Their warmth enveloped her like a forgotten embrace, filling a hollow she had long ignored. Leora's easy laughter and Mirabelle's quiet kindness transformed the imposing dining room into something resembling a home. "You've brightened him," Leora confided one afternoon as they strolled arm in arm through blooming gardens, sunlight filtering through fresh leaves. The words lingered with Eloan long after, equal parts comfort and burden. Yet as intimacy grew, so did resistance. Society's whispers sharpened, no longer content with vague curiosity. Matrimonial matrons cornered Eloan with smiles that never reached their eyes, quizzing her on her obscure lineage. Each response, carefully rehearsed under Draven's patient coaching, landed smoothly, but every barb chipped away at her resolve. Worse still were the red herrings. Anonymous notes slipped discreetly onto her dressing table, hinting at Draven's hidden motives, questioning the sincerity of his attentions. Doubt crept in during quiet hours. Was this alliance merely pity? A convenient arrangement born of necessity rather than desire? And yet the bond deepened. A shared dance at Almack's blurred the line between pretense and truth. His hand at her waist felt less like an obligation and more like a promise unspoken, steady and sure. In the gentle sway of the music, she forgot the audience entirely. Later, during carriage rides wrapped in darkness and motion, they exchanged quiet confessions. Her father's ruin, spoken with lingering shame. His estate's near collapse, admitted with guarded candor. Vulnerability stitched something fragile but real between them. Hope flickered. Draven's defenses softened. His restrained almost smiles transformed into genuine warmth, rare and disarming. When he looked at her now, it felt less like assessment and more like consideration. Lady Thalira's plans for an engagement soiree only amplified the tension. Her enthusiasm clashed violently with Eloan's growing, complicated affection. "We must announce properly," the aunt declared one morning, already discussing guest lists and floral arrangements, blissfully unaware that the foundation of the match remained a fiction. Eloan confided fragments of her turmoil to Leora, who listened without judgment before squeezing her hand. "Fight for what blooms here," she urged gently. Still, frustration mounted. Draven evaded deeper intimacy, retreating whenever emotions edged too close. His past lingered like a locked door she was never invited to open. One evening, amid the glittering chaos of a crowded salon, he pulled her aside, guiding her toward a quiet alcove. "This charade weighs on you," he said softly, his fingers brushing hers with an intimacy that felt unintentional and devastating. "If you wish to end it." He left the sentence unfinished, but Aloan's heart rebelled fiercely. She did not want less. She wanted honesty. She wanted him. The pressure finally peaked at a lavish garden party. A rival debutante delivered veiled insults with surgical precision, questioning the legitimacy of their match. Before caution could restrain her, Aloan defended him, her words laced with a passion she could no longer deny. Draven's gaze afterward held unspoken questions, his expression unreadable yet intense. In that moment, as lanterns glowed and laughter echoed around them, Aloan felt suspended between truth and illusion, aching with unresolved hope as the engagement soiree loomed closer. A bond born of deception had grown dangerously real. Would you trust it? After such intimate glimpses of truth? Share your thoughts in the comments. The garden party's aftermath clung to Aloan like a persistent storm cloud, its unspoken tensions trailing her even as she escaped into quieter company. Accompanying Leora to a bustling book emporium near the Strand, she welcomed the sanctuary of narrow aisles and towering shelves. The scent of aged leather, dust, and ink wrapped around her, grounding her in something solid and enduring, so unlike the fragile performances of society. They moved slowly between shelves, fingers grazing spines as though the act of browsing might untangle heavier thoughts. Leora's questions came gently at first, almost casually, but there was intent beneath her warmth. "You defended him rather fiercely at the party," she said, selecting a slim volume and glancing sideways. "Was that merely duty?" The question struck deeper than Aloan expected. She hesitated, then exhaled. Words she had not yet spoken aloud rose unbidden. "I think I care for him," she admitted, the confession trembling into the quiet space between them. "Far more than I ever intended." Leora stopped walking. When she turned, her expression held no surprise, only recognition. "He deserves someone who sees his heart," she said softly. "Not his title, not his armor." Her eyes, so achingly similar to her brother's, reflected a depth Aloan had come to recognize, an inheritance of resilience shaped by disappointment. The moment fractured abruptly. A hush rippled through the shop as Lady Serena Quill entered, her presence commanding attention without effort. Golden elegance clung to her like a second skin. Rich fabrics, impeccable posture, confidence sharpened by privilege. Where Aloan was understated, Serena was unmistakable. And then Draven appeared at her side, having arrived moments earlier than expected. Serena's smile curved slowly as she took him in. "Darling Draven," she drawled, her gaze flicking deliberately to Aloan. "Engaged so suddenly? How quaint." The word lingered, laced with mockery. As conversation unfolded, the truth emerged with devastating clarity. 7 years earlier, when Draven had inherited a title burdened by debt and scandal, Serena had abandoned him, choosing security over loyalty, wealth over risk. The ease with which she revealed it left Aloan chilled. This was not confession. It was conquest. Draven said nothing. His jaw tightened, knuckles whitening at his side. The silence spoke volumes. A betrayal long scarred over, but never forgotten. Serena extended an invitation then, her tone falsely gracious. An intimate soiree at her residence. A gathering among friends. The trap was exquisitely veiled, and Leora, ever aware of the social battlefield, accepted with polite composure. As they left, something fundamental shifted within Aloan. Draven's restraint, His emotional distance, his careful boundaries, no longer felt like indifference. They were defenses, forged in humiliation and loss. Later that evening, beneath the filtered light of the park's shaded paths, Eloan could no longer contain the weight pressing against her chest. "Why hide this from me?" she demanded, her voice trembling despite her resolve. "Why let me believe your caution was disinterest?" Draven stopped walking. For a long moment he said nothing. Then the words came, unguarded, raw. He spoke of public ruin, whispered laughter, of rebuilding his fortune inch by inch while learning never to trust affection offered too easily. He spoke of his sisters, unprotected when he was powerless. And finally of himself. "I intervened for you," he said quietly, "because no one intervened for us, and because I knew what it meant to be abandoned when you were most vulnerable." Emotions surged between them, sharp and undeniable. When he pulled her close, the kiss that followed was not tentative. It was fervent, consuming, a revelation of desire long restrained by fear. For a moment the world fell away, but reality returned swiftly. Society's scrutiny loomed. Serena's intentions were far from benign, and Eloan's heart, no longer protected by uncertainty, now hung exposed. Doubt crept in, insidious and relentless. Was Draven's affection genuine? Or was she merely standing in the shadow of an old wound? A safer choice after heartbreak? The soiree loomed ahead like a crucible, promising confrontation, revelation, and consequence. And Eloan could no longer pretend that love, true or false, was without cost. The days leading to Serena's soiree became a slow, suffocating descent. Despair tightened its grip on Eloan until even her thoughts echoed too loudly, insecurities reverberating like thunder trapped within a narrow hall. Installed once more in Lady Thalira's grand home, she paced its elegant chambers endlessly, rooms of polished marble and gilded moldings that now felt less like sanctuary and more like a beautifully appointed prison. The sapphire necklace Draven had given her lay heavy against her collarbone. Family heirloom, public declaration. What had once filled her with breathless wonder now felt like an accusation. Each time she touched it, she was reminded not only of what it symbolized, but of what she stood to lose. The whispers had grown teeth. Anonymous broadsheets circulated with cruel efficiency, their inked insinuations branding her a fortune hunter, a clever nobody who had ensnared a duke above her station. She caught servants exchanging glances, overheard pauses in conversation that stretched a moment too long. Her already fragile standing eroded further with every veiled smile and murmured aside. Draven, meanwhile, seemed to retreat behind walls she could no longer breach. His visits were brief, restrained, his presence taut with unspoken strain. When he looked at her now, it was as though he were fighting ghosts only he could see. The warmth they had found together flickered, threatened by the shadows of old wounds dragged violently into the light. "This was meant to protect you," he said during one strained encounter, his voice low and conflicted. "Not ensnare us both." The words landed heavily. Protection had become a cage. Care had curdled into distance. By the time Serena's soiree arrived, hopelessness had crested into something sharper. Resignation edged with dread. Her townhouse glittered like a monument to excess, marble floors gleaming beneath cascades of light. Crystal goblets chimed constantly, their delicate music sounding less like celebration and more like mockery. Every detail spoke of power wielded with intent. Serena moved through the crowd like a conductor guiding an orchestra, orchestrating moments of humiliation with exquisite precision. She directed pointed questions toward Eloan, about her lineage, her upbringing, her remarkable rise. Each inquiry framed politely enough to deny cruelty, yet sharp enough to expose poverty and difference. Guests leaned in, curiosity thinly veiled as concern. Then came the reminiscences. Serena spoke fondly of dear Draven's past affections, stories in which Aloan had no place. Laughter followed, hers, then others. Aloan stood rigid, spine straight, hands clenched, her carefully practiced composure fracturing as gazes shifted from interest to pity. Draven remained silent. When Serena placed her hand on his arm, when she leaned close to whisper of what we lost, he did not pull away. His expression remained unreadable, distant, an echo of the man who had once been abandoned and learned to endure in silence. "You deserve better than pretense," Serena murmured to him, her voice honeyed and deliberate. The words pierced Aloan cleanly. A dagger slipped between ribs. In that moment the room seemed to tilt. Every fear she had tried to master surged forward, unchecked. Desperation spilled over in a secluded alcove where music dulled and shadows gathered. Aloan confronted him, her restraint finally undone. "Do you still love her?" she demanded, her voice breaking despite her resolve. "Am I nothing more than a shield against your past?" Draven hesitated. The pause was brief but vast, a chasm wide enough to swallow hope whole. That hesitation answered her more cruelly than words ever could. Overwhelmed, Aloan turned and fled. She barely registered the startled murmurs behind her, the sudden hush as she passed. Outside, the night air struck cold and sharp. The carriage wheels clattered over cobblestones as London blurred past in streaks of lamplight, her tears rendering the city unrecognizable. Back in her room, alone at last, doubt closed in relentlessly. She felt unworthy, invisible, a convenient fiction that had dared to believe itself real. The pretense that once promised safety had stripped her bare instead, leaving only the terror of genuine loss, and the aching certainty that loving him might cost her everything. And for the first time since this dangerous masquerade began, Aloan wondered if walking away would hurt less than staying and hoping. Windows as though the morning itself hesitated to intrude. Aloan had not slept. She sat wrapped in a shawl, hollowed out by the long night, when the letter arrived. Draven's seal stared up at her from the envelope. Familiar, heavy, unmistakable. Her hands trembled as she broke it open. The words inside were not polished. They were not guarded. They were raw in a way she had never seen from him before. Ink pressed hard, lines uneven, as though written in the aftermath of something breaking open. He wrote of love without qualification, of fear without excuse, of the moment he realized that losing her would be the truest ruin of all. Enclosed was something else entirely, the deed to a modest estate on the outskirts of the city. Small, unassuming, entirely hers. "So that you may stand free," he wrote. "So that you owe me nothing. So that if you choose me, it will be from desire, not need." The words struck her like breath after drowning. Hope, fragile and dangerous, flickered to life in the hollow place despair had carved. Aloan rose and stood before the mirror, studying the woman reflected there. Auburn locks lay disheveled around her shoulders, her eyes shadowed, but beneath the exhaustion burned something fierce and newly resolute. She straightened her spine. "I am enough," she whispered. The words felt foreign at first, then steadier, truer. They echoed Leora's voice from the night before, during a clandestine visit meant to offer comfort but delivering something far greater. His sister had spoken quietly, earnestly, of the changes she had witnessed in her brother, of smiles that came unbidden, of conversations about futures once dismissed as folly, of a man who had begun to imagine happiness again, and was terrified by it. "He didn't know how to reach you," Leora had said, "but he has never stopped loving you." That knowledge steadied Aloan now. She did not wait for permission. She did not write in return. She went to him. Voss Manor rose solemn and time-worn against the morning sky, its ancient oaks lining the drive like silent witnesses. Their leaves whispered as she arrived unannounced, her heart pounding with equal parts fear and certainty. She crossed the threshold not as a supplicant, but as a woman choosing her fate. Draven was in the study, light streaming through tall windows, dust motes suspended in the air. He turned sharply at her entrance, surprise stripping away his composure. For once, he did not hide his vulnerability. "I built walls after Serena," he said quietly before she could speak. His rigid posture cracked, shoulders slumping beneath the weight of old truths. "I thought they made me safe, but you breached them without siege." Eloan stepped closer, her resolve unwavering. She told him of her father's ruin, of learning to disappear in rooms where she did not belong, of how invisibility had once seemed safer than hope. "I chose you," she said, "not because I need shelter, but because I want you, because I believe we heal together or not at all." Silence stretched, then broke. He crossed the distance between them and held her, not as protection, not as possession, but as an equal. The embrace felt like a bridge laid carefully across every chasm they had feared too wide to cross. "I will defy them," he vowed softly. "All of them." And this time his courage mirrored hers. As the days unfolded, the world shifted subtly into alignment. Leora's betrothal was secured, her joy unshadowed. Plans for Mirabelle's debut moved forward with laughter instead of anxiety. The household breathed easier, as though something long strained had finally loosened. Eloan slipped the sapphire ring onto her finger, the heirloom no longer a burden, but a promise freely chosen. It gleamed quietly, symbolizing not status, but partnership. Ahead loomed the final test. The impending ball, where truth would no longer hide behind pretense and society would demand its reckoning. But now hope bloomed unafraid. This time, they would stand together, unhidden, unashamed, and unbroken. The grand ball at Voss Manor erupted in splendor, a spectacle designed to command attention and, tonight, to demand judgment. Chandeliers blazed overhead, scattering diamond-bright light across marble floors where nearly 400 guests gathered. Aristocrats, financiers, old rivals, and cautious allies. Music swelled, silk whispered, and beneath the elegance, tension coiled tight as a drawn bow. When Eloan descended the staircase on Draven's arm, the room shifted. Her emerald gown caught the light like living flame, a bold declaration against weeks of whispered doubt. She walked not hesitantly, not cautiously, but with a calm, unmistakable resolve. Heads turned. Conversations faltered. Draven's presence beside her was steady, unapologetic, his hand firm at hers as though daring the world to challenge what they claimed together. Eyes followed them everywhere. Among the throng, Lady Serena Quill lingered like a venomous current beneath clear water, smiling, circulating, planting whispers with practiced ease. Each murmur sharpened the scrutiny upon Eloan, testing whether her confidence would fracture under public gaze. It did not. The moment of reckoning came not in the ballroom, but beneath the cool night air of the terrace, where lanterns glowed softly against stone. Serena intercepted them there, her civility stripped bare by proximity. "A remarkable performance," she said coolly, "but we both know convenient fictions collapse eventually." The accusation echoed too loudly to ignore. Nearby guests paused, curiosity sharpening into attention. Eloan stepped forward before Draven could speak. "You discarded him," she said clearly, her voice ringing with controlled strength. "When he needed loyalty more than admiration. You measured love by fortune, and walked away when the sum displeased you." A hush fell. Serena's composure wavered for the first time. Draven turned then, no longer silent, no longer restrained by old wounds. "My heart," he said, voice steady and resonant, "belongs to one who values it beyond title or wealth. That choice is final." The words landed decisively. What followed was not chaos, but recalibration. Guests leaned closer. Influential figures, long uncertain, exchanged glances. Draven spoke openly of his restored estate, his rebuilt legacy, of debts long cleared and futures secured. More importantly, he spoke of choice, of standing unashamed beside the woman who had believed in him when belief cost something. Allegiances shifted perceptibly. Quiet assurances passed between powerful allies. Serena's smile tightened, then vanished altogether as she recognized the tide had turned beyond recovery. She withdrew, her influence unraveling as swiftly as it had once dominated. The music resumed, and then the waltz. Draven drew Aloan into the center of the floor, the orchestra swelling as couples parted instinctively to give them space. They moved together seamlessly, the world narrowing to the measured rhythm of shared breath and unspoken understanding. "I will not hide us again," he murmured. "Not ever." She met his gaze, eyes bright, unafraid. "Nor will I." As the final note lingered, Draven stopped, still holding her hand. Before the assembled room, he lowered himself and offered not spectacle, but certainty. Applause erupted, thunderous and unrestrained, echoing against vaulted ceilings as Aloan accepted, laughter and tears blurring together in a moment too full for restraint. Relief, triumph, and joy intertwined as embraces surrounded them. Society's verdict rendered unmistakably clear. The pretense was shattered. The choice was made. The future claimed together. 8 years hence, Voss Manor basked beneath a gentler sun. Light filtered through ancient oaks and spilled across the terrace in soft, dappled patterns, warming stone that had once borne witness to conflict and doubt. Aloan stood there now, hands resting lightly on the balustrade, watching the future she had once feared to hope for unfold before her. Across the manicured lawns, her children raced through the late afternoon light. Kai, the eldest, led the charge, his dark hair wind-tossed, his expression marked by the same stormy intensity that had once guarded Draven's heart. Behind him came the twins, Serial and Niev, their fiery curls catching the sun as they laughed and tumbled, inseparable and fearless. Their voices rose together, a bright symphony of growth, freedom, and belonging. For a moment, Aloan simply watched, marveling. Marriage had not erased complexity, but it had woven every thread into harmony. Leora's Highland household thrived, laughter echoing through halls once marked by uncertainty. Mirabelle's poetic union flourished as well, her creativity encouraged rather than constrained, Draven ever her fiercest champion. Even Lady the Lyra lived on in memory and tradition, her stories retold with fondness, her influence preserved in rituals passed lovingly to the next generation. Aloan had grown, too. Now Viscountess of Voss, she had stepped fully into her role without surrendering herself. The modest estate once gifted in uncertainty remained hers still, not as refuge, but as quiet assurance. A symbol of choice freely made, of independence never demanded but always honored. She had never needed it. That was the point. Footsteps sounded behind her. Draven joined her at the railing, his presence warm and easy. The once icy reserve that defined him softened into a strength rooted in trust. Time had etched lines of laughter at his eyes, tempered ambition into purpose. He followed her gaze to their children, pride and tenderness unmistakable. "We built this from pretense," he murmured, taking her hand and brushing a kiss across her fingers, the sapphire ring glinting softly, "and turned it into truth." Aloan smiled, leaning into him. Their union had been forged not in ease, but in vulnerability, tested by doubt, strengthened by choice. Together, they had learned that love was not the absence of fear, but the courage to meet it hand in hand. As twilight deepened and the first stars pricked the sky, Aloan whispered, "Worth every risk." Draven's arm tightened around her, and joy settled over them. Not fleeting, not fragile, but steady and enduring. A family unbreakable. A love that had defied expectation, scandal, and fear, and emerged stronger for it. The night stretched onward, filled with laughter, warmth, and promise. A dawn they had earned, a future they had chosen. How did this ending of hope and transformation resonate with you? Share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more captivating tales.